You're almost 30. Stop leeching, Dad said over Christmas dinner. I'd covered $8,000 a month in bills. Then started paying for their vacation house, my graduation. Skipped life. Then they posted a photo gifting my sister a Tesla. For always being there. I just smiled. That night, I transferred every asset back to me and left a flash drive in Dad's desk labeled, "Good luck without me." I, 29M, sat at that Christmas dinner table, fork halfway to my mouth, when Dad dropped his bomb about me being a leech. The irony hit harder than his words ever could. For the past 4 years, I'd been quietly transferring $8,000 every month to cover their mortgage, utilities, groceries, and whatever else they needed. Not once did they ask where a fresh college graduate got that kind of money. They just took it. My parents had always been terrible with finances. Dad bounced between sales jobs, and Mom worked part-time at a boutique that barely covered her shopping habits. When I graduated with my computer science degree and landed a remote position with a tech startup, I thought I was finally in a position to help the family that had struggled to put me through school. What I didn't realize was that my help would become their crutch, and my sacrifices would become invisible. The vacation house comment stung because it was true. Instead of moving out and starting my adult life, I'd stayed in my childhood bedroom, funneling my entire salary minus basic living expenses into keeping their lifestyle afloat. I'd turned down job opportunities in other cities, skipped social events because I couldn't afford them after supporting my parents, and watched my college friends build careers and relationships while I remained stuck in this financial quicksand. My younger sister had always been the golden child. She dropped out of college twice, moved back home, and spent her days working part-time at a coffee shop while pursuing her latest creative passion. Yet somehow, she was the responsible one in their eyes. She was the one who got praise for helping Mom with grocery shopping using money I'd provided. She was the one who got credit for being emotionally supportive during Dad's job transitions that I'd financially cushioned. That night, after Dad's leech comment, I went to my room and stared at my laptop screen. My bank statements showed the truth in black and white. Over 4 years, I transferred nearly $400,000 to my parents. Money that should have gone toward my own apartment, my own car, my own future. Instead, it had funded their comfortable suburban lifestyle while they criticized me for not being independent enough. The next morning, Dad left early for his sales calls. Mom was at her boutique job, probably telling customers about her wonderful daughter who always helped around the house. My sister was still asleep until noon, as usual. I sat in the kitchen where Dad had called me a leech, and something inside me shifted. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. First, I pulled up 4 years of bank statements. Every transfer was there, meticulously recorded by my banking app. Then I gathered the utility bills I'd been paying directly, the mortgage statements that showed payments from my account, even the credit card statements where I'd covered their vacation expenses and home repairs. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I spent the afternoon creating a comprehensive spreadsheet. Every dollar was accounted for, every sacrifice documented. The vacation house Dad mentioned? I'd paid for the down payment and first 6 months of expenses. My sister's car repairs, Mom's medical bills, even the Christmas gifts they'd bought for extended family. It all traced back to my money. But the real revelation came when I dug deeper into their spending patterns. They weren't just bad with money. They were actively wasteful because they knew I'd cover the shortfall. Restaurant meals 3 times a week, expensive shopping trips, premium cable packages they never watched. They'd grown comfortable living beyond their means because my income had become their safety net. That evening, they returned home in good spirits. Mom had bought new decorations for the house, and Dad was talking about upgrading his phone. My sister emerged from her room around dinner time, complaining about needing new tires for her car. The casual entitlement in their voices made my stomach turn. As we sat down for dinner, Dad mentioned a financial advisor who'd suggested they start investing some of their excess income. The absurdity hit me like a physical blow. They thought they had excess income because they'd forgotten where their comfortable lifestyle actually came from. They'd rewritten the narrative in their minds until my contributions became invisible, my sacrifices meaningless. I excused myself early and went to my room. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my laptop and began transferring every asset back to my personal accounts. The joint savings account they'd insisted on when I first started helping emptied. The shared investment portfolio where I'd been building their retirement fund liquidated, and transferred. Even the small emergency fund I'd maintained for their unexpected expenses, gone. But I didn't stop there. I called my bank and canceled all automatic transfers to their accounts. I contacted the utility companies and removed my payment information from their accounts. I even called the mortgage company and informed them that future payments would need to come from the primary account holders. The most satisfying part was creating the flash drive. I compiled every bank statement, every receipt, every piece of evidence showing exactly how much I'd contributed to their lifestyle over the past 4 years. I included detailed calculations showing how much interest they'd cost me, how much potential investment growth I'd sacrificed, even an estimate of what my net worth could have been if I'd kept that money for myself. At the bottom of the final document, I wrote a simple note explaining that since I was such a leech, they'd probably be happier managing their finances without my interference. I mentioned that I'd found a new position in another city and would be moving out within the week. I thanked them for helping me realize that true family support doesn't require financial exploitation disguised as love. I saved everything on a flash drive labeled "Good luck without me" and placed it in Dad's desk drawer where he kept his work papers. He'd find it Monday morning when he sat down to prepare for his sales calls. The next few days were surreal. I went through the motions of normal family life while quietly making arrangements to leave. I'd actually been offered a position in Seattle 3 months earlier, but had turned it down because I didn't want to abandon my financial responsibilities to my parents. A quick call to my contact there revealed the position was still available. My parents had no idea what was coming. They continued their usual routines, spending money they assumed would be there, making plans that depended on my continued financial support. Dad even mentioned wanting to take a weekend trip to the vacation house, and Mom started planning a dinner party for her friends. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. These were the same people who'd called me a leech while living off my income for 4 years. The same people who'd praised my sister for helping around the house while I'd been paying for the house itself. The same people who'd criticized my lack of independence while actively depending on me for their lifestyle. On Sunday night, I packed my essential belongings into my car. Everything else could be shipped later or replaced. I'd lived so minimally for 4 years, funneling every spare dollar into their comfort, that I barely owned anything worth keeping. My entire adult life fit into 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. I left early Monday morning before anyone was awake. I'd already arranged for temporary housing in Seattle and would start my new job the following week. As I loaded my car in the pre-dawn darkness, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time since college graduation, my income would be entirely my own. Update 1. Dad found the flash drive that Monday afternoon. I was already 6 hours into my drive to Seattle when my phone started buzzing. First came the confused text messages, then the angry voicemails, then the desperate attempts to reach me as the reality of their situation sank in. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. Their credit cards were approaching their limits. The vacation house payment was scheduled for automatic withdrawal from an account that no longer had funds. The comfortable financial cushion they'd taken for granted had vanished overnight. Mom called crying, claiming she had no idea how much I'd been contributing. Dad left increasingly frantic voicemails as he worked through the spreadsheets I'd compiled, seeing for the first time the true scope of their financial dependence on me. Even my sister, who'd never shown much interest in family finances, called to ask if I was serious about leaving. I answered none of their calls that first week. I was too busy setting up my new life in Seattle, finding a permanent apartment, and adjusting to a work environment where my entire paycheck belonged to me. For the first time in 4 years, I opened a personal savings account and watched money accumulate instead of disappear. The second week brought more desperate communication attempts. They'd apparently consulted a financial advisor who'd laid out the harsh reality of their situation. Without my monthly contributions, they couldn't afford their current lifestyle. The vacation house would have to be sold. They'd need to downsize their primary residence or find additional income sources immediately. Dad left a voicemail that started with anger but ended with something resembling understanding. He'd spent hours going through my documentation and realized exactly how much I'd sacrificed for their comfort. Mom sent a text apologizing for not recognizing my contributions and admitting they'd gotten too comfortable relying on my help. But it was my sister's message that surprised me most. She called to say she'd gotten a full-time job and was looking for her own apartment. Apparently, The reality of potentially losing the family home had motivated her to take some actual responsibility for once. She also mentioned that she finally understood why I'd seemed so stressed and withdrawn over the past few years. Update 2. 3 months later, I received a letter from Dad. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. He'd sold the vacation house and used the proceeds to pay down their mortgage and credit cards. Mom had taken a full-time position at a different boutique that paid significantly better. They'd downsized to a smaller house and were learning to live within their actual means. The letter was an apology, but more importantly, it was an acknowledgement. Dad admitted that they'd grown comfortable taking my help for granted and had convinced themselves that my contributions were smaller than they actually were. He recognized that calling me a leech while I was supporting their entire lifestyle had been not just unfair, but cruel. He also mentioned that they'd started seeing a financial counselor who'd help them understand how their poor money management had essentially trapped me in their childhood home. They realized that my inability to move out and start my own adult life hadn't been laziness or dependence, but the natural consequence of diverting my entire income to support theirs. Mom included a separate note apologizing for praising my sister's minimal contributions while ignoring my massive ones. She admitted that they'd fallen into a pattern of seeing my financial support as automatic and invisible, like a utility bill that just got paid somehow. She said she finally understood why I'd seemed increasingly frustrated and withdrawn over the past year. My sister had apparently told them about several conversations we'd had where I'd tried to discuss their spending habits or suggest they might need to adjust their lifestyle. At the time, they dismissed these conversations as me being controlling or negative. Now they realized I'd been trying to warn them that our current arrangement wasn't sustainable. The most meaningful part of Dad's letter was his admission that they'd failed me as parents. Instead of helping me launch into adult independence, they'd created a situation where supporting them had become my primary responsibility. Instead of celebrating my professional success and encouraging my personal growth, they'd unconsciously turned me into their financial safety net. Update 3. 6 months after leaving, I agreed to a video call with my parents. They looked older somehow, but also more grounded. The stress of managing their own finances had been difficult, but they seemed proud of their progress. They'd successfully downsized, established a realistic budget, and were both working full-time for the first time in years. Dad had gotten promoted at his sales job, partly because he'd finally taken it seriously once their family's financial stability depended entirely on his performance. Mom had discovered she actually enjoyed retail management and was considering pursuing additional training to advance in the field. My sister had moved into her own apartment and was working full-time while taking community college classes to finish her degree. She told me she finally understood why I'd been so focused on my career and finances all those years. She'd never experienced the pressure of supporting other people while trying to build her own future. During our conversation, we talked about the possibility of rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. I made it clear that while I was open to having a normal family relationship, I would never again serve as their financial safety net. My money was now dedicated to building my own life, and any future help would be occasional and voluntary, not systematic and expected. They seemed to understand and accept these boundaries. Dad mentioned that their financial struggles had actually brought them closer together as a couple because they'd had to work as a team instead of relying on external support. Mom said she felt more confident and capable now that she was contributing meaningfully to their household income. The conversation wasn't entirely comfortable, and there were moments of tension when we discussed how long their financial dependence had continued without acknowledgement. But there was also genuine remorse and what seemed like authentic understanding of how their behavior had affected me. I told them about my life in Seattle, my career advancement, and the apartment I'd finally been able to afford. For the first time in years, I was building savings, investing in my retirement, and even dating someone who appreciated my financial responsibility rather than taking it for granted. We ended the call with tentative plans for me to visit during the holidays, though I made it clear I'd be staying in a hotel and paying for my own expenses. The era of me automatically covering family costs was permanently over, but perhaps we could build something healthier in its place. Looking back, leaving that flash drive and walking away was the best decision I'd ever made. Not because I wanted to hurt my family, but because it was the only way to break a cycle that was destroying my future while enabling their irresponsibility. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their dysfunction, even when that refusal feels harsh in the moment.